Hello, I am Magdalena Kaiser, the Director of Public Relations for VQA Wines of Ontario, providing knowledge and resources on behalf of the Ontario VQA wine industry. So really excited to be here today to welcome you to Gamay, VQA Gamay Noir 2.0. This is the final session of the 10-part series, and we hope that you've watched all the other sessions on Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Noir, and Cabernet Franc, both in the 1.0 and the 2.0 versions. These sessions are focused on core varieties and helping you discover some of the key flavor characteristics of Gamay, in this case, in Ontario. Learn about the different styles and also talk about food and wine pairing. And most exciting, of course, is always meeting the makers. So today, we are welcoming back John Sabo, Master Sommelier, who has taken us through the other 2.0 series, and he will be introducing 5 producers from Ontario who will be presenting their wines and also telling us a little bit about why they love Gamay and what they like to enjoy with Gamay. So thank you, and we'll see you at the end of the presentation, and off to you, John.
Thank you, Magdalena. Welcome back. I'm really happy to be back to speak about Gamay in particular for this session. As I'll share in just a moment, the statistics for the variety are still relatively small, but I can assure you that in the trade, in the sommelier and the wine buyer community and the wine writing community, Gamay is experiencing disproportionate love. I would say that it's a variety that really has found its place in time and in space right now. In Ontario, it's a variety that I believe strongly we do exceedingly well, and I'm quite sure we're going to see increased plantings of that. I can tell you from my experience at the National Wine Awards with the Wine Line, when it comes down to the flights, we're excited about certainly Chardonnay and Riesling and Pinot Noir and Cabernet Franc, but also Gamay. We would love to see more of them, and we know that producers are going to be planting more Gamay and making more wines in the various styles that they come in. So I'm going to go very quickly through a little background information on the where, when, why, how of Ontario wine, but I'm going to refer you to visit one of the previous sessions on Riesling or Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, where I go into a little bit more depth on the specifics of the terroir of Ontario wine country. And I'm going to leave a little bit more space this time around to hear from our 5 winemakers. We've dragged them again out of the middle of harvest to share their stories with us. So we want to utilize their time as well as possible. So in just a moment, I'm going to bring in Jean-Pierre Collat from 13th Street, Rob Power. We're going to welcome him back, this time from Creekside Estate Winery, Shiraz Motiar from Malivoire, Thomas Batchelder from Batchelder Wines, and Haddon from the Foreign Affair Winery. So those are our protagonists for today. So as I said, let's just take a quick little tour, starting with this beautiful photograph. I hope you recognize this view. I'm looking at you, Shiraz Motiar. That is the Malivoire vineyard there, just to show you the importance of that little escarpment you see in the background, the Niagara escarpment, which makes all things possible here in the Niagara Peninsula. Briefly, if you want to communicate to your customers what makes Ontario wine a little unique, special, well, it comes down to 3 things, essentially. It is latitude, it is the lakes, and it is the limestone that underlies most of Ontario's vineyards. Not all, but the vast majority. Briefly, again, latitude really just determines your place on the planet for the length of the growing season and the number of sunshine hours throughout that growing season. And Ontario is in the sweet spot for grape growing on an international level. But of course, if it weren't for the lakes, we wouldn't be growing grapes. The importance of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie can't really be understated because, of course, we don't have the same climate that they have in other similar latitudes over in Europe or over on the western side of North America. It is heavily moderated by the lakes. It's almost to the point where you could call it a maritime climate. It's not. It's pure continental, but the fact that we have these moderating bodies of waters makes this rather severe, and we know what our weather is like here in Southern Ontario, makes this, what could be very severe, much more suave and mitigated to the point where grapes actually thrive here. We ripen grapes without any issue. Most years, the winters are sometimes what causes problems when temperatures drop really low. But as we learned over now 40, 50 years of grape growing, which varieties will withstand and perform best in our climate. And then back to the underpinnings of it all, the limestone, which the Niagara Escarpment is formed of. The area of Prince Edward County sits on essentially a limestone shelf. And chemistry aside, it is really about the structure created by limestone and ground up limestone and fractured limestone, the porosity, the drainage that makes a pretty happy environment for vine roots, all of which was heavily influenced by the ice age that lasted from about 14,000 years or so ago up until about 4,000 years ago, 10,000 years of grinding glaciers over the surface of southern Ontario, which left behind big chunks of rocks in some place called erratics, and also ground down, churned up the underpinning limestone for the most part, leaving behind fine silty limestone particles and clays. Again, all of which work together to create a little bit of magic. Okay, again, brief reminder, we all know that VQA is 100% Ontario grown. And as I've mentioned in previous seminars, it's not the case that every consumer who walks in to the shops will fully understand what VQA means. It is an appellation system, like all other appellation systems in the world, with government backing, with laws in place, laws with actual teeth that can guide the consumer towards 100% locally grown stuff. And in terms of the levels of appellation, it starts at the base with VQA Ontario, wines made anywhere in Ontario, in one of the designated viticultural areas or one of the emerging regions. And then above that is the more specific appellation level, so Lake Erie North Shore, Niagara Peninsula, and Prince Edward County. And above that, in ever smaller, more discrete parcels of land, the sub-appellation system, which exists in Niagara, and well, one sub-appellation in Lake Erie North Shore. Above that, single vineyard, something we're starting to see more and more of as wine growers identify the best sites throughout the province, and to give them a little bit of shelf recognition, if you will, put the name of those vineyards on the label. I'm not going to spend much time here because you know already Lake Erie North Shore, you know Niagara Peninsula and Prince Edward County as the three official wine growing areas. We're learning about other parts of the province that can and already are making some exciting wines, from the shores of Lake Huron over to the Ottawa Valley, future viticultural areas perhaps, but for now still under the VQA Ontario level of appellation, down to the Niagara Peninsula, where over time, over now 50 years, subregions have emerged, sub-appellations now officially, each with their own slightly different, not radically different, but slightly different characteristics, but enough to make genuine taste, flavor differences, structure differences from the various areas. And very briefly again, I was talking about the moderating effect of the lake and the importance of the Niagara Escarpment here itself. If you think about the importance of the lake, you'd understand that closer you are to the lake, the more suave the climate is. A little bit cooler in summer, a little bit warmer in winter, less of radical shift. The further you get from the lake, the more extreme, if you will, the climate becomes, so that in Fine Mountain Ridge and St. David's Bench, for example, it warms up much earlier in the spring, gets a little bit hotter in the summer because you're further from the cool waters of the lake, but also cools down more rapidly in the fall because you don't have the warm moderating effect. All of which to say that the growing season is long enough in all corners of the Niagara Peninsula. It's just the time that heat and sunlight come is shifted, whether you're closer to the lake or further from the lake. But I'll let the winemakers get into that a little bit more specifically. This again for you to reference later on, just some of the details of those different sub-appellations, what to expect. And I've mentioned in the past that we can kind of break down the Niagara area into two main areas, two main sub areas: the escarpment area, everything that is right under that Niagara escarpment, and just on the top or on the second bench, where it's a little bit cooler than, for example, you would experience typically in the other main area, which is Niagara on the lake, and these four sub-appellations there: Niagara Lakeshore, 4 Mile Creek, Niagara River, and St. David's Bench. Slightly flatter topography, slightly warmer, longer season growing degree days. And then over to Prince Edward County, I mentioned before, the coolest of the official viticultural areas. Short, tight growing season, best for those varieties that ripen early, like Pinot Noir, like Chardonnay, like Gamay even. And then that leads us down to Lake Erie North Shore with lots of sunshine hours here, longer growing season, but different soil structure, a little more sandy than you find in either Prince Edward or the Niagara Peninsula. Right, so some specifics. I mentioned that I would share some facts with you off the top. So Gamay represents just 3% of the total VQA wine production. That's by volume, so a little bit less than Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir was sitting at around 7%. So you're asking yourself, why are we talking about Gamay? Well, as I alluded to off the top, it is really the wine of the times as we've seen consumers' preferences shift, starting certainly with the trade, but now it's trickling down to the consumer level, I would say. People are searching for, I believe, and winemakers will correct me if I'm wrong, lighter, fresher, leaner, less wood, lower alcohol, higher acid wines, and Gamay just fits perfectly into that mold effortlessly. You don't have to force it to be a lighter style of wine. It just is that naturally. So what was probably terribly unpopular back in the 90s and early 2000s has finally found its time in the sun. And I think purchases will certainly increase based on the changing demographics, changing types of wine. I'll also throw one other thing out there, the fact that the natural wine movement has become quite important, less so on the commercial level, but let's not forget that had its origins in the Beaujolais area of France. And I mention that only because that's the origin of the Gamay grape. But in trade circles, Gamay has gained a lot of attention because of that attachment to the natural wine world, which is again trickling back into and dovetailing beautifully with the movement towards sustainability and organics and in some cases biodynamics. So Gamay really kind of has come to the right place at the right time. There are 500,000 bottles, so not insignificant, but not massive production made in 2019. But important to note that in the last decade or so, we've seen an increase from about a couple dozen or so wines labeled with Gamay back in 2010 to now over 60, actually 65, as I checked the stats very recently, 65 wines with Gamay on the label you will see on the shelves. So obviously producers are gaining confidence in it and by extension, consumers too are picking up on it. So we'll see more planted, I would guarantee you that, and we'll see more labels emerging. Briefly about the different styles. We know, like Pinot Noir, the vast majority is made into a table wine of lovely freshness, elegance, finesse, and above all, drinkability. I always recommend drinking Gamay with a light chill. I drink most of my reds with a light chill, certainly Ontario reds, but Gamay absolutely shines when it's a little cooler, so the fruit really pops out. And then beyond that, we can get into all sorts of nuances, which I hope we will, whether we're talking barrel aging, old wood for the most part. Very rarely do you find oaky Gamay, but then we can play around with different amounts of whole bunch, get a little bit of that carbonic effect a la Beaujolais, or go for a more traditional vinification that starts to resemble a little bit more Pinot Noir. Gamay makes terrific rosé. I shared my love last time around for Pinot Rosé, which I think is brilliant. Gamay, very similar, ripens early. You get all of that fresh fruit and that light, low alcohol style that people are looking more and more towards. And sparkling, there are a few. It's not huge yet, but Gamay sparkling, why not? I would make it probably in tank method. Let all that fruit shine. Add a little bit of freshness from the carbon dioxide, and away you go with a very food-friendly wine. So here again is another favorite of the sommelier when looking for just the right wine to pair with a pretty broad range of foods. We can go anywhere from, we talked about vegan food with Pinot Noir, but with Gamay, why not as well? Vegetables, grilled vegetables, eggplant, you can see there is absolutely perfect. Fish, happy with your salmon, your lake trout, some of the meatier fish, and then straight on through to pork and Gamay, chicken and Gamay. One of my favorite things to do is to grab a bottle of chilled Gamay, a little roast chicken, head out to the park and have myself a fun picnic. Not alone, of course, that would go with somebody else. And with the rosé versions or even the sparkling versions, why not a little fresh cheese, a little burrata, a little homegrown Ontario-made burrata or mozzarella di bufala. Why not? Speaking more of cheese, for the most part, with the lighter styles of Gamay, I would go with something a little softer, bloomy rind, a little creamier. Got that wonderful acidity that works so well with the creaminess of high-fat cheeses. With some of the more tart versions of Gamay, I love to go towards goat. Goat is a higher acid milk than cow for the most part, so you get the tang from the cheese matching the tang from the wine, and things generally work themselves out from there. With some of the more structured Gamays, with some of the old wood barrel aged wines, you can dial it up a little bit, slightly older cheese, slightly more mature cheese, harder, where you get a little bit more of a salt kick from the cheese, which tends to bring out the fruity side of those more structured Gamays. So lots of options there. There's really very few things that don't go well with Gamay. That's just the truth of it. All right, it's time to bring in our winemakers here. This is the range of wines we are going to be tasting, which you have on your shelves or have had or will have on your shelves. So let's start it off with Jean-Pierre Collat from 13th Street Winery, gentleman who spent some time before arriving in Canada in another part of Burgundy, the northern end, quite far from Beaujolais, with lots of experience growing Chardonnay and Chablis. But Jean-Pierre, can you join us, please? Are you with us?
Yes, sir, my friend.
Welcome. We know you're also in the middle of harvest, so we'll keep it short and tight, but 13th Street has a tremendously long history with Gamay. In fact, one of the first great Ontario Gamays I tasted in the early 2000s was the Sandstone Vineyard Gamay, closest thing to Cru Beaujolais I'd ever tried. So I'd love to hear, first of all, a little bit about the history of the winery for those who don't know it, and then your take on Gamay. We've got a couple of different wines here from you. What are the differences between them?
Well, the history of 13th Street with Gamay, starting at the very first day, basically, 13th Street opened the door in '98, and they have started right away to work with Gamay. He has been a very important part of the portfolio and the plantation. And you mentioned the Sandstone Farm, that was one of the co-owner of 13th Street at this time that created the winery. So it was very important in the portfolio. Very special. You say first best Gamay you try when you arrive. Just the same for me. I arrived in 2000 in Ontario, and I discovered this kind of a magic stellar cuvée from a very special vineyard, and it was very impressive. 13th Street are just very focused on the Gamay. We are going to talk about Gamay in red version, single vineyard and everything. But we have 5 different labels of Gamay, just fitting all the different styles that you were just showcasing. We are even doing sparkling Blanc de Noir 100% Gamay. I think it's the first ever made here in Ontario, and just one of the very few in the world. Very special, very exciting for me and for the customer, just to discover something different than Pinot Noir as Blanc de Noir. We have also a very light, fresh rosé, 100% Gamay, called Vin Gris, just paler and fresher, lower alcohol, higher acidity, and just very, very refreshing, very exciting. And we have 3 red versions with 2 single vineyard, very different. So yeah, very, very important for us here at 13th Street. And I would like to say, like everybody in the region, more and more successful for professional and also for the more and more private people, for easy drinking and very versatile wine for food pairing, very friendly with food, for sure.
All right, so we're going to get into the wines in just a second, but I'd love to hear briefly your perspective from a grape growing side of things. Is Gamay a friendly grape to work with in the Niagara Peninsula?
Yes, Gamay is very friendly. If you want to say, yeah, very friendly. You have to keep it under control because it could be even too friendly, just cropping a bit too much and just producing lots of wood and just very winter tolerant, a little bit more tolerant than the Pinot Noir, for example. Not specifically fragile. Big cropper if you don't control the yield and if you don't do green harvest and lots of different things in the vineyard. But pretty generous. No problem of ripening. No sensitive to botrytis. No sensitive to disease. And honestly, with our weather, with our climate conditions, I think we can develop, and we have developed in the last 20 years, lots of very interesting things with the Gamay grapes. Varietal, I would say just easy, very easy behavior, but you just need to keep under control because it could be too
friendly overall.
Very
friendly overall, but like everything in the world of wine, you still have to keep on top of things and work towards control. All right, so we've got two wines from you here today. We've got the straight up Gamay Noir, and we've got also the Witty Vineyard Gamay. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about, first of all, the origins of the first one, which is labeled as Niagara Peninsula. So I imagine you have some fruit from outside of Creek Shores.
Yeah, so just this label that you have on the screen, it's the biggest volume that we are making. It's coming from different vineyards, from different locations. Still 85% from the property on Creek Shore, but also a few of the long-term contract in around the lake, especially. So just we are just putting that under the Niagara appellation. It's not a sub-appellation. It's not a special vineyard. Just it's blending component coming from different farms. The farms are harvested, fermented, separate in tank. It's 100% stainless steel tank. Various size and various process. Sometimes it's a hand push down. The perfect example of Pinot Noir. Sometimes it's a bigger tank with a pump over. Sometimes it's a délestage. Lots of different options, but keeping all the farms separate to be able to continue to have more data and more knowledge about the soil and the specific connection between the soil and climate. Cold soak, cold maceration before almost about a week. Pretty cold, 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, just to develop the fruit, to extract the fruit, to stabilize the color, and just to have the maceration without any alcohol content. On this cuvée, I would like to say half of the blend is coming from wild yeast. Half of the blend is coming from inoculated commercial yeast. Depends of the location, depends of the farm. As I say, 85% on site at the property, and after everything is just everything is fermenting post maceration. The post maceration is going from 1 week to 4 or 5 weeks. Function of the farms, function of the size of the tank, function of the initial quality of the grapes, and malolactic on top. Natural malolactic, no inoculation of lactic bacteria. I would like to say.
I would imagine that this would be a selection from all of those different lots that you have coming into the winery. And for this particular bottling, you're looking for freshness, or at least what I'm tasting here is all about that wonderful cranberry, fresh red cherry, tart, juicy, highly drinkable style.
Yeah, the freshness, the juiciness, and we have always a little bit of spice, just black pepper, very aromatic. You have a little bit of the mineral. It's after the blend, it's just to try to build something. I think we mentioned the word friendly. Of course, it's just friendly, easygoing, complex. It's still a light red. We can assimilate that as a Pinot Noir, just no problem. But it's not because it's light that it has not to be complex. So lots of different things. to emulate the taste buds and just to work for the food pairing. Charcuterie plate, cheese, just magic, very classic, just nibbling, just tapas. As long as it's not too spicy, just to play with the acidity. Pretty dry.
On my picnic, perhaps this would be my picnic wine. Drink with a light
indeed.
chill. So with the Witty vineyard, now we've moved up to a single vineyard. For me, a little bit more structured, a little bit more depth here. What's the special characteristic of the Witty vineyard?
So now we are talking about a single vineyard selection. The Witty vineyard is just on the Creekshore appellation, on site of the winery. This vineyard has been planted from 2008, 2009, 2010. Most of the vineyard has bin planted from cuttings coming from old farms, and just especially from the Sandstone farm in Virgil, in Agranda Lake. So basically, we are developing our own vegetable material. We are propagating our own signature, even on the vegetable side, and it's part of the 2009 and 2010 block. Picked a bit later than the regular bottle. We are talking about 24th of October in 2018. So just we are going in the season. We are looking for the ripeness and just to have a very, very special signature. A bit more mineral, a bit more austere when it was young. It's starting to open nicely now. A little touch of gaminess, still a bit of spice on it. Very, very distinct, very different. Perhaps a bit less juicy, perhaps a bit less easy at the beginning, but very, very special. And again, just not much more tannins than the regular one, but a little bit more character, a little bit more difficult and a bit more precise, just to get in at the beginning, but very, very nice on the aftertaste, on the persistence and everything.
So a wine, a Gamay for a consumer who's looking for a little bit more breadth, a little bit more complexity, maybe has a little bit more experience and is looking for some of those less friendly aspects, as you put it out. And I agree with you, although it's still a delicious and highly drinkable wine. Would you recommend aging this, or are you happy with where it is right now?
You can age a few years, or of course, no problem. Just because of my process, because of my winemaking feeling, just it's always a bit more austere, always a bit more reductive when it's young, because it needs more time to open. There is a kind of a time frame, but this bottle would be better after 2-3 years than when it's young and just from the bottling and from the release. But potentially, why not about 5, 6, 7 years? We know that Gamay has a nice acidity. The acidity is carrying on the aging. It's going to mellow. It's going to soften a little bit with the time, and you can keep that in the corner of the cellar for later tasting. There's no problem.
So we'll drink the I'll call it regular Gamay, although I don't really like that term to begin with. In the next year or so,
it's not always very elegant, but it's very functional as a description. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much, Jean-Pierre, for sharing your love for the grape. Obviously, it comes through quite clearly, and thanks for contributing to the scene of Ontario Gamay with no less than 5 labels. It's a great range to move through. And yes, you're quite right. I was talking about tank method sparkling wine, but I have tried your Blanc de Noir from Gamay, and it is absolutely unique, and actually the first and only one I've tasted in the world. So thank you for that, and good luck with the rest of harvest.
Thanks, John.
Merci, au revoir.
Bye.
All right, so let us now move from Creek Shores to Creekside, and actually we'll stay in Creek Shores. We've got Rob Power joining us back again. Rob, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself, John?
It's a terrific afternoon in Southern Ontario in the middle of harvest. I'm sure you'd rather be out there continuing on with your harvest. So let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about the background of Creekside. You were representing Queenston Mile before, and then, playing off the note of black pepper. And I know you make a brilliant Syrah too. When I tasted your wine, I was full of that black pepper, a really unique expression of Gamay. So tell us how you managed that.
Well, Creekside's known primarily in our red wine portfolio for delivering big full-bodied reds, Cabernet Merlot, Syrah, and some of the more full-bodied Pinot on the peninsula. So usually I have to drive down the street to my neighbor Jean-Pierre's place to get some good Gamay. We don't have any Gamay on our own properties ourselves. And as Jean-Pierre alluded to, the big issue with Gamay growing in the vineyard is that it wants to overcrop, right? It offers a tremendously high yield, and discipline is essential to growing good Gamay, as far as I can tell. So it's unusual for us to get access to some Gamay that I really wanted to make fruit from or make wine from. That happened in 2017. This wine is labeled VQA NP, but it's I think 96% from one vineyard in 4 Mile Creek. The 4 Mile Creek appellation, you know, it's flat there. The soil tends to be a little bit on the sandier side. There's a few patches of clay around, but usually if you're going to look at a field of Gamay that wasn't contracted by Shiraz or Jean-Pierre or one of the big producers, it would be something that was going to be way overcropped. We really like the look of this fruit in 2017. And in your preamble, John, you talked about how the market has moved away from necessarily the biggest and boldest and most powerful wines to maybe looking for a little bit more elegance and restraint and acidity. Maybe Creekside portfolio, our red wine portfolio, has kind of grown up in that way too, that we're realizing that everything doesn't have to be chocolate thunder to be a viable wine style. So for me to be able to make a wine that was lighter bodied and very much acid driven as opposed to tannin driven on the finish was just an absolute pleasure.
What was the first year that you made Gamay, Rob? The first vintage for this? What was the first vintage for Gamay at Creekside?
2001. What was the second vintage? 2017.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, we just don't have a regular fruit source for it. So we have to pick our spots when it becomes available. Yeah.
And your particular take on the vinification? Everyone's got a slightly different recipe.
We didn't do much special on it. There was no carbonic. It was pretty much traditional vinification. I tried to get it off the skins pretty fast when primary was finished. I didn't want to add a speed bump of tannin to that nice acidity that was already there. So I just liked having it acid being the structure of the wine and keep the fruit clean.
And not to delve too far deep into the technical side of things, but Gamay, as we know, is a grape that tends towards the reductive side of the spectrum, not oxidative, and that's what brings out a lot of that black pepper character that I'm sensing in this wine. This is all stainless steel?
It is all stainless steel, but this is Creekside too, John. We've never been afraid of the dirty bit, so.
Well, these are the good sulfides. I have no problem with this. And, you know, all I can do is imagine some pepper crusted piece of fish or pork loin or something like that.
Oh, come on. I haven't had lunch yet, man. Don't go there.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for sharing your Gamay story from 2001 to 2017. Can we expect more in the future? Have you secured your source?
As soon as I can find some good fruit. Maybe Shiraz will sell me one of his blocks. Why don't you just ask him when he's on camera?
I'll bring him on in a moment and see if we can score you some fruit. All right. Well, good luck with the rest of harvest. See you soon.
Cheers, John.
Right. Okay. And speaking of Shiraz Montillard, let's bring in Shiraz. Are you with us? We know you're there. I know you're out in a vineyard somewhere. Hopefully you can flick on your video and join us here, because the story of Gamay at Malivoire is long and deep, and I know you've traveled. Ah, there you are.
Here we are.
First of all,
nice to see you, John.
You are genuinely out in the vineyard there. I love the breeze there. It looks like a slightly overcast afternoon in Niagara. Let's not talk about weather. Let's talk about Gamay. Let's talk about Malivoire's history with Gamay, because I know you've done a little research and you've headed to the Mecca. You've been to Beaujolais. You've seen how it's done over there. What did you learn from those trips, and how has that informed your winemaking over on this side? And how does Ontario stack up?
Absolutely, sure. Well, quickly on Malivoire. It's funny, the last three wineries you've shown, we've all been born at the same time in the I think 1998, and that's when we planted Gamay. It was one of 5 or 6 main varieties that were planted here on the Beamsole bench, along with Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Gewürztraminer, and so they're all sort of equal plantings. And funnily enough, Gamay was planted predominantly just for rosé. Rosé was, and as you know, with our Ladybug rosé and our Vivant rosé, it's a very big part of who we are and what we like to do. But it didn't take very long. Once the first crop of Gamay that we got in 2000, it was like, this is pretty nice. And so since then, we've been focusing on making a Gamay, and I think the just like you, the 1998 13th Street Sandstone was a real Kickstarter for us in terms of what the potential is for Gamay here in Niagara. And so we have slowly changed focus, and so our Pinot Noir, which was meant to be 100% red, is now 90% rosé, and our Gamay, which was supposed to be 95% rosé, is now 95% red. So, and as our time here and evolution over the years has grown, our portfolio of Gamay has grown. In 2005, we started working with the Wismer Foxcroft Vineyard, and that became our second source of Gamay. And now we take fruit from Niagara Lake as well. I'll get into that when we talk about the wine. But to touch upon the travels and going to the heart of Gamay, Beaujolais, that was very much of an eye opener, because when I started making Gamay, I think I took the approach that I have to treat Gamay like I do Pinot Noir. It's about the extraction and the gentle touch that you use with Pinot Noir, fully destemmed to get the maximum extraction. And it wasn't until we went to Beaujolais as a group that I kind of understood the finer elements of carbonic maceration and whole cluster fermentation, and also working with different types of vessels. So instead of just only fermenting in stainless steel, we now use concrete, which is pretty much what all of Beaujolais uses. It's not the only vessel, it's because we only have so many, but to have that as part of how we treat Gamay, I think is unique. And I'm actually looking out to the vineyard, sitting on one of my concrete tanks as we speak.
All right, so let me bring up the slide of the wine here. So this is one of a few Gamays that you make. This is your, let's call it your introductory Gamay. Sure. Tell us about this one and compare it to the small lot, if you would, and also the Courtney.
Yeah, so we make, in 2018, we made 6. In 2019, we made 7 Gamays. Maybe when I get to making a light sparkling Gamay, that'll be 8. We'll see when that happens. It may be around the corner. But yes, we have a small lot Gamay, which is all estate grown. Beamsole Bench is our main vineyard, our estate vineyard. We also have a small vineyard in the Vinemount Ridge. That's the big brown section on the map there. But it is essentially hugs the southern part of the Beamsole Bench, the brow of the escarpment. And so it also gets that moderating effect, but it is still exceptionally cool next to the
getting an important phone call.
I thought I had that sound. So there you go. So those 2 sites really make up the small lot, and then on top of that we have our some single vineyard wines like our Courtney, but this one is a blend 50-50 of Niagara-on-the-Lake fruit. And yes, Rob, it is that block amongst a couple other vineyards in Niagara-on-the-Lake in the Four-Mile Creek and in the Niagara Lake shore. And then on top of that, our bench vineyards. So the winery here, Vine Mount Ridge, and predominantly the 20-mile bench Wismer. So in this wine here, it's a little bit fermented in concrete. A small portion of whole cluster goes into there just to give it that little, both those things I find really help enhance the exciting dynamic focus of Gamay, that pure fruit that you get. And then when we age it, it's 65% in stainless steel, 35% in barrel, and yeah, it's full of lovely bright cherry bramble fruits, and really fun, good acidities. So of course a nice little chill on it, and great with wood-fired pizza, or even a nice big paella, or even jambalaya. I think the spice works okay. There's always a little bit of that black pepper here too, but that's the way to enjoy Gamay every day.
Nice, everyday Gamay. We should make T-shirts
Gamay
or something like that. Well, that's terrific. Maybe just briefly to finish up, because I'm kind of curious, the difference that you see in the fruit from, say, that 4 Mile Creek area versus what you get on the bench.
Oh, it's interesting. Like in this vintage, we harvested Niagara on the Lake September 27, 28, and on the bench October 11th. So you do get earlier ripening in Niagara on the Lake. The fruit are beautiful in both elements, though I find that with the limestone structure to the bench soils, you do get a bit more acidity and a little bit more structure, so a little bit more length on the palate when you're drinking. So I find the blend of the two makes it the most enjoyable, actually, and like I say, an everyday wine.
Brilliant. Do you believe, Shiraz, enough in Gamay to plant it in your very own vineyard, the Motiar vineyard?
100%. I'm waiting for 3 more vines of Pinot Noir to die, and then the whole thing's coming up for Gamay.
All right, so maybe a 9th wine in the Malivoire lineup coming up. That would be terrific. Thanks so much. We'll let you get back to your beautiful vineyard behind you there, and we will catch you very soon, I hope.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Moving along, we have none other than Thomas Batchelder joining us here. Thomas, are you there? Thomas was out and about in his vehicle earlier today on his way to harvest some grapes, but he's made it back to the barrel cellar. Hello, Thomas. How are you?
Can you see me? I see you, John.
I can see you. I can see you perfectly well. I can see your barrels. I can see your map behind you. So for those who don't know you, and I'm not sure if any of those people actually still exist, but give us a little brief history of Thomas Batchelder. We know you've made wines in very important parts of the world other than Ontario, but now focus on Ontario. And you've done some really interesting things with Gamay. I've had the pleasure of tasting the full range. You're playing around with different amounts of whole bunch and stems, and really kind of pushing the envelope with this variety. So I think your perspective will be terrific to listen to.
So yeah, John, I mean, I've been watching the beginning of Jean-Pierre Collat, who arrived in Canada just before me. I came from Quebec, but actually from Oregon. So I did arrive in Canada from my own country back in 2003. And I came with a perspective of wanting to deliver more terroir wines, of single parcel wines from the Clos Jardin for Pinot and Chardonnay. Always loved Gamay. Always loved Gamay as a home winemaker. Like Shiraz says, I mean, those first 3 who went, oh my God, how to talk about stuff. I want to talk a little more historically, but I, in 1991, discovered the cement vats of Beaujolais, like Shiraz did much later because he's younger, although we both look like mountain men right now because of COVID. You were doing pretty good for a while now. Thanks for cleaning up for today for all of us.
Just for today, yeah.
But I got to say, though, that Beaujolais, with its concrete tanks, with its various proportions of whole cluster, and with its also the food, the botte, and some small barrels, which are less successful in general, but not in specific, I would say I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated with especially the Beaujolais cru. But as I did Oregon, Burgundy, and Niagara for other people, right? Lemelson, Burgundy was Chateau Genet Boulanger and Domaine Marius de l'Arche, and of course the Clos Jardin here. By the time we went out with Batchelder, I knew everything and nothing. and I'm learning slowly. When Malivoire made that great switch, and I know that 13th Street has always done Gamay, and I've loved those. I've loved all those wines. When Malivoire made its great switch to Gamay, I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? You do such amazing Matillard and Moira, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And I think over time, they've right-sized it to do everything well, including rosé, and they're helping to define it. From my point of view, it was slightly different. It was doing Saint-Véran-les-Châtaigniers down in Saint-Véran, and I would always share the car with people who were going to check on their Beaujolais grapes or their Beaujolais contracts, depending what time of the year it was. And I slowly, dimly realized that Gamay was a medium-bodied perfumed grape type with great ability to age like Pinot Noir and a great ability to, pair with things on the table. Different but equal to Pinot Noir. And I said, if the Burgundians are running to Beaujolais, parce qu'ils ont pas l'offre, they don't have a wide enough
range of wines.
Yeah, they don't have a wide enough anymore because all these other countries are importing their wines. So whether they buy something in Beaujolais or whether they bring those grapes up to Nuit Saint-Georges or Beaune and keep them separate is immaterial. They're doing it. And that's why I thought, I'm fighting against Flat Rock and 2027 Cellars and all these different people and Cloudsley to get Pinot Noir. Why don't I try to get a little Gamay while there's still some around? And I realized I fell in love. And Gamay liberated me. The thing you're going to hear today, I've never said to anybody else, is I've always done 100% whole cluster, 100% distemmed with Pinot Noir, because I mostly work in the New World and I want to discover those terroirs and I don't want to obfuscate it with 20% whole cluster or 50. Well, guess what? I've been in Niagara for 17 years now. I think I know the Pinot vineyards a little better. I'm going to actually let Gamay influence me into doing some whole cluster in Pinot where those vineyards could benefit from it given the year. So for Gamay, the village for me is very important because we know as journalists and as wine lovers that you have in Beaujolais, you have Beaujolais Village and Beaujolais Village. There's ones that are blended from many villages, and there are ones like Lantignier that should be a cru. And so what kind of style do you make? And very simply, what we do here is we take Wismer Foxcroft, 22% whole cluster, Wismer Foxcroft, 52% whole cluster, Wilms, the old Samstone from Niagara Lake, and now a new one called Bylands, which is on line 3, the same line as Inniskillen. And we look from the harvest, what is going to make a great expression of Niagara while not taking anything away from the single vineyards. It's totally thrilling to be able to work with a grape that can do single vineyards and village as well. And I don't know if it should be gulpable or ageable. We just try to make something that's true to the entire region of Niagara with this bottling.
And are you happy with what you ended up here with in 2018? How do you describe it? It's, regardless of what you were aiming for, which I guess you didn't know, but how did it end up in your words?
Right. So right now, like Mountain Man Shiraz, Mountain Man Thomas says, we're in the vineyards. We can only think of 2020. 2020 is like my new girlfriend, and this is past history. But I got to say that we...
Can you dig out a little bit of that history just for us?
Well, it's like this. It's like, and it's the same at Quélus, where we're making Tradition as well as the Grand Quélus. When people think that you just select the greatest stuff for your single vineyards and then everything what's left over, it's like, no, from the vineyards, from the first en cuvaison, when you first got it in vat, you're thinking, what will be the village? And let's not go too far, and let's not go far enough. So this is leaning largely on Wismer Foxcroft that Shiraz also loves, that I hope he lets me continue to get a part of, because Malivoire is a lot more powerful than Little Batchelder. And they're such great Gamay makers. A little bit of this, a little bit of Wilms, formerly known and that's got older vines. It's lighter now. It's got that old vininess, the Wilms. but it doesn't have the color it once had. There's some virus in there. And you put it all together and you always think, what benefits a single vineyard? But if I make one less barrel, less single vineyard, is the village better? And John, because I've read your book, I got to tell you, you didn't do the book on granite. You did the book on the volcanic soils. But how can we do this without granite? To the answer, the only answer can be much of Beaujolais, not all, does it with granite, but a bunch of it does it without granite. And it's absolutely delicious on dolomitic limestone. And I don't think it's all about terroir, and it's not all about how much whole cluster, but you have to get to a certain amount of deliciousness and ageability. I think we've got it here. I shudder to speak after those other three great wineries, but I think if we all together can make Gamay one of the top 5 grapes of Niagara and have more focus for Niagara and for Ontario, I think it's a wonderful thing. And do you remember Malcolm Anderson?
I do, of course.
He was really, really old. He was 55. Hint, I'm older than that now. And he said to me, Thomas, as I've got along, he's Yorkshireman, I won't try to do the accent. He says, I've really started to like Gamay. I said, Malcolm, you're going to live a long time, so you can still age Bordeaux and port, whatever you want to do. He says, no, but the appeal, the direct appeal of the fruit gets to me. And I said, okay, well, I'll file that. You file that away, and I'll drink Solaya, okay? But the point is,
and now that you're Malcolm's age back then.
Now that I'm Malcolm's age,
you're reaching towards more Gamay.
Yes, I'm marching towards more Gamay. I still love Pinot the best, but Gamay is I think this is another chance to define Ontario through parcellaire, but also through those blends that make people happy. And like for Batchelder, like for anything else, Ontario must define itself by the wines the consumer sees. We're going to do more and more Gamay single vineyards, but if people don't get Ontario Gamay with our village, then I missed the boat. You know?
Well, I tell you what, I'll do my part to spread the word, because I think you're doing a thrilling job with the variety, and it's great to see you getting into the parcel selections. I think there's a pretty lovely representative Gamay of Niagara that has just enough juiciness, but also some underlying seriousness. And for me, your wines are all about texture, and this one is super fine and refined. And I know we could chat all day and all night, and hopefully we'll have some more opportunity to talk more Gamay and Pinot any day. But we're going to have to leave it there. Thomas, thank you so much. I know you got to get back to your vineyards, but we'll pick up this discussion very soon. Thank you.
Cheers, man. Nice to see you. So clean shaven.
So long. All right. Yes. Thomas, what a lovely fellow. Listen to him all day, but let's jump into our last wine. We're going to take you for something a little bit different here. Introduce the Foreign Affair. We've got Ed Haddon, who is the, how should we describe him? He's the head sommelier. He is the general manager, and I think chief forklift driver, as I learned earlier this morning, for the Foreign Affair.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Terrific. Well, thanks for joining us, Ed. I know you've been working with Len and Marissa at the Foreign Affair for a few years now, so you've got a little bit of background. This is going to be our first foray into not pure Gamay this time around.
No, not at all.
Pinot Noir, but more importantly, the raison d'etre, the reason why the winery was founded, was to reproduce the Venetian method of appassimento and ripasso, and this has a little ripasso influence. So first of all, briefly, if you could give us just the background on the Foreign Affair, and then lead us into this particular take on Gamay plus Pinot.
You bet. Well, first off, you can hear me well?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, good. Sorry. First off, I'm definitely the odd man out in this conversation. Not only is this a blend of Pinot Noir and Gamay, but it's a ripasso, as you said. Len and Marissa started the winery after visiting Italy, falling in love with Amarone and wondering if they could do those same things here. Now, we're not using Italian grape varieties. We are drying the fruit the way they do, but we're using initially just Cab Franc, and as the years have gone by, they've expanded and experimented with a great many different varieties, including this, of course. So this is Pinot Noir and Gamay. It all comes from our estate here on the grounds, the Vineland Research Station. Our main vineyard is up in the Beamsville Bench area, but we do have a small 8 acres here, and that's where this particular fruit comes from. And it, again, it's a little bit like there's a Passe du Grain from France, where we blend Pinot Noir and Gamay. That's not unheard of, but those are co-fermented. This is not the case here. The Pinot Noir was picked a full month after the Gamay in this vintage. So that gave our winemaker at the time, Barclay, the chance to do an experimentation where he made the Gamay just as anyone else would, and then dried the Pinot Noir for a month, and then used the skins from that as the ripasso portion in the wine. So something quite different compared to the rest of our Gamays here.
And so, I mean, you lead tastings at the winery frequently. You're out on the street. You're talking to sommeliers and buyers. You're presenting this wine. What's the reception? What's the reaction? And how does this, for you, fit into the range of styles that we've looked at today?
It's interesting stuff. For the range within our own winery, it's the lightest one we make. There's no oak on this wine either. It's all stainless steel. And when I'm out talking to people about it, I agree with pretty much every conversation that's been happening earlier today. Everybody's talking about it now in the restaurants, how impressed they are with to use a phrase I don't like, crushable Gamays. So they're enjoying, this wine is really finding, I think, a home finally in Niagara, even though the general consumer perhaps hasn't caught on to it yet, but the somms and the restaurants are really starting to pick up with these type of wine for it.
Don't worry, Ed, it's happening. It's happening as we
slowly,
speak.
yeah. We have to just plant more. We only have about half an acre of, 3/4 of an acre Gamay on the site right now. So
you haven't applied the Appassimento or Appassimento technique specifically on Gamay, it's just been on the Pinot Noir portion so far?
Until today. Today was our
breaking news, ladies and gentlemen.
Breaking news. Our very first, today is the first day of harvest for us. And we went out and picked by hand. In fact, we just got all the staff out there to do it this morning. And it's going in the shed for drying. And that's the first time we've ever tried to dry any Gamay. So Renee is our current winemaker. Renee is keen to do some pretty fun experimentation. I'm very interested to see how that's going to play out.
Oh, brilliant. More stuff to look forward to. Maybe super briefly, just to finish up, describe for someone your Appassimento, your drying chamber, for someone who hasn't seen the process done.
In Italy, the drying chambers are called fruteos. We call them a barn because if you take the tractor out and put the fruit in, I call it a barn. So it's a barn. We load the fruit in. What we're aiming, we don't intervene with heat. We don't intervene with anything else. We're not trying to put it in a kiln. Simply goes on a barn, especially in their old tulip bulb trays. Allow some airflow around the grapes. We put a few fans in, and we hope for the best. We close the door and away we go. We've got the 3 barns we use now. 2 of them are really old barns, so they have good ventilation naturally. And one of them we need to help with a little bit more fans to keep things going. Because of course, as you're drying, the critical thing is keeping mold away. And so in the first week or 2, when we start drying, you really have to walk through the barn quite often just to keep an eye on things. But once they settle down after that, they can, depending on variety, Cab Franc can go 3 months, but Pinot Noir really only a month when we do it. A lot more delicate. To be honest, I don't know that we'll be doing a lot of Appassimento Pinot. We have tried several times, and it's a tricky grape for that.
Well, it makes pretty good wine without any Appassimento too. So
I think it makes. Yeah, there are options. I agree.
Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us, Ed. Thanks for telling us about
the
Embrace. I love your labels, by the way. For those who don't know, it's like an Italian background with iconic Canadian animals on there, just to make the link between Italy and Canada. So great. Thank you. Good luck with Harvest 2020.
Thank you very much.
And with that, let's bring back Magdalena Kaiser, who's got a couple of words to finish off the session.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for today's session. It's, as I said earlier, Gamay has a special place in my heart, and I think Ontario does great things with it, and we'll probably see lots of more great things to come. So thank you for this session, and also to the producers for taking time out of their busy harvest day and season for talking about your Gamay and how you feel about the variety and what can be found in the LCBO right now. Thank you again to the LCBO staff for your education, knowledge, and service, and watching these videos. John mentioned this earlier, and we have to continue repeating that VQA is certified 100% Ontario grown. So it's important that we remind people to really look for that on the label to make sure that they are buying local. And with that, it's the perfect time to talk about local with people looking for more local, and remembering that really VQA is the most sustainable choice for Ontarians. And we can see that from the numbers that are quite compelling. Every single bottle that someone buys of VQA contributes $98.20. That's almost $100 back to our economy, and supports so many jobs in so many sectors across Ontario. And the value proposition for Ontario VQA wine is always high, but especially so in the case of Gamay. It really over-delivers on the style that it brings and the price points that you can purchase these wines at. And it was really exciting to hear the stories from the producers today. So if we can move to the next slide, one final thank you, and then just to remind everybody that if you have any more questions about the wines or the wineries, please do contact Doug Beattie. His email is on the slide here, and he is Ontario's VQA Wine Ambassador, always happy to help answer any questions, and happy to serve you in any way that you need. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next time.